Hey everybody.
All right. I've never used one of these before, so if I go the wrong way, just wave. So welcome, thank you for coming. We're here today to talk about driving user adoption. So it's definitely something that comes with the platform, isn't necessarily considered in that kind of sales process. So we're going to be touching on that. The agenda, pretty self-explanatory. Can't see there we go. So why adoption? We'll go into that. We'll also learn more about the King story, so driving adoption from 0 to more than 500 users on the tool in less than a year. And also we're going to talk about tools for change, so some of those softer skills that you can apply as soon as you get back to the office. So why are we talking about adoption? The tool itself is usually brought on by data analysts, sometimes data architects, things like that. But there are people like me that need access to data as well. Before Looker, the only kind of sequel that I was aware of was like Toy Story 2, I don't know, The Hunger Games, couldn't spell ETL, wasn't in my vocab. There are people like me in all areas of your business. That CEO isn't meant to look like me, but let's just roll with it. But yeah, so you can see here a number of different departments are using Looker. It's not just about the data team. So how do we think about adoption? We've kind of talked about this, and we actually think it's best to split it into two areas. So you've got your data stack, the data architecture, and all of that underlying goodness that makes people successful with the tool. John's going to be talking more about that. I call that the clever stuff. And then enablement and planning. Planning being the most important part. So when you do kind of a change management qualification, that's kind of drilled into you from the beginning. All the planning happens up front, whether it's communication, the strategy around that, the strategy around training. If you have that locked down to begin with, and you identify different personas throughout the organization, that's going to keep you on target. So one of the best examples that we've seen of kind of this change management and adoption of the tool is absolutely from King. So hopefully a familiar face. It's kind of like being on stage with a celebrity right now, which is pretty awesome. So I'm going to pass over to John.
Thank you. Hey everybody. So yeah, you've already met me at the keynote this morning. I'm Director of Core Data Services at King. And I'm going to take you through a bit of context of what we do as a business. Again, you've heard a bit of that already. Our growth path, the strategies we've used to try and get the business engaged in the vision we had for implementing Looker at King. So from a King perspective, we make mobile games, as we talked about, and we have 200 million monthly active users across our game events, and they play roughly 1 billion events a day. Which ultimately adds up to 40 billion events to be processed every day. And, you know, easy, we just need to put some kind of tool on top of that so people can do macro analysis or in-game feature analysis, every kind of analysis they want, fix that with one tool. Easy, right? So how have we tackled that? It's not been a straightforward journey for my entire time at King, but when Looker entered the equation, we had a bit of an epiphany about how we wanted to take this forward. So what does that growth look like? So as Zara's already said, we've gone from roughly just under 20 users at the start of 2017 to over 500 12 months later. And what I like about this is that it's not just the sheer number of users we've got now at King engaged with Looker, but it's how engaged they are. So that queries per day chart, we're now hitting around 15,000 queries a day powered by Looker in one form or another. So that's a subject I'll touch on a little bit later as well, because that, that comes with certain repercussions that you're going to need to be aware of. And from a content perspective, this could look slightly daunting, but we've got 110 models, 400 explores, and 615 dashboards. So go back to what Frank was talking about earlier, maybe that's that dashboard explosion that's a terrifying ordeal. But actually for us, that's a good thing. Because that's not come at the expense of truth. And there's a reason for that, and that is our hub and spoke architecture, which I'll take you through in a moment. So we don't mind the fact that those dashboards exist. That's more than one per user. That shows that people are engaged, they're using the tool, they're surfacing the things that they want, and obviously there's a degree to which some of these things are used more than others. But what we like to see is that people are heavily engaged with what we're doing. So a little bit of background as well, just around our tech stack. So what are we querying? So currently at King, we've got a sort of dual stack of Exasol and Hadoop, which we query through Impala. And Hadoop infrastructure, that's 15 petabytes on disk. This is enormous volumes of data. We tend to use Impala for history and Exasol for lower latency, more recent data speed. But in practice, about 90% of our queries go through Exasol at this moment in time. And we have the biggest Exasol cluster in the world, I'm told. So that's not what the future looks like. We're currently in the process of migrating our on-prem architecture to Google Cloud Platform and BigQuery. Which will hopefully, and we believe, mean that we no longer have to make these prescriptive choices of do you want speed or do you want history. We can start to bring those two things together under Looker. So that's enough about the tech stack. So data modeling approaches and our architecture, our Looker architecture, is very relevant to this idea of adoption. And I'll explain why in a bit. But first of all, let me talk about what I mean by centralized versus hub and spoke. So centralized, by that I mean typically like a single instance of Looker, and they'll have one explore, say, for sales funnels, one for order items, one for user acquisition, maybe something like that. These are singularly maintained, often by centralized teams, and everybody in your instance is referencing that product. And that's great, and that's classic, and that'll work for a lot of people. But we've chosen a different path at King, and that's hub and spoke. So by hub and spoke, what I mean by this is that we have this idea of the core and the middle, and the core is where we define common truths, so common company KPIs, things that whether you're in user acquisition or game development, you want to be talking the same language about the number of players, what retention means, what an install means, and so on. So we define that centrally. But what we don't want is that to be a blocker to the fluidity of what's around the business and their own kind of contextual nuance. So what we do is we literally lift and shift this core product out to satellite projects where they're able to take it and extend it. I don't know how much of a feature it is used across all Looker customers, but we make heavy use of this idea that you can take something, you can extend it, augment it, enrich it with something that's relevant on your level. So as I was sort of saying this morning, there's no way that I'm going to understand in a centralized team the characteristics of a game feature. What I can do is tell you the broad truths, and then I can let you take those truths, inherit that, and add more richness around it. So let's have a look at what that is in practice. So this kind of infographic here, what we see is the core model at the top. We've got, say, our device KPIs with some device dimensions, activity and purchase facts, those common truths again. And then we literally lift and shift that out to our satellite projects using Git, where these pink boxes come in, and that's where they're adding their own context. So again, in performance marketing, know way more about campaign ROI and what to do about that than I do. So they can take that common stuff and add the bits around the edge that mean more to them. So this is really well suited to distributed businesses like King. We want to be able to get the best of both worlds, truth and agility, and we're pretty confident we do that through this approach. So why is this important to user adoption? Well, the architecture choice you're going to make is going to determine the types of people you have to engage with in the business, the degree to which you're going to have to get people involved in the technical side or not. So, just to recap, on hub and spoke, we get all the flexibility, all the truth, but it comes at a bit of the price of a bit of complexity. Or we have centralized, where we get that truth, we get less flexibility, but it's more simple. So how we approach the users around that, how we approach the data scientists or data warehouse engineers is going to be informed by this choice. But we want to make that choice up front and then plan accordingly around our training methods and content surfacing and everything else. So another theme I wanted to touch on after the workflow is deciding on the themes of your adoption. So one of these I want to dive into a bit more than the others, and that's the powering data workflows piece here. So this is, for me, is all about preparation. It's the extent to which you understand your business and you understand the kinds of users that are within your business. And then once we do that, we're going to be able to understand the features that are in Looker that are going to resonate most with them. We don't want to take an approach whereby we say, hey, here's Looker, it's great, isn't it? Everyone can see the value inherently. No, we want to be able to take certain features and we want to take those to the people we think they're really going to capture the imagination of. And that comes down to preparation and understanding what's happening out there in your business. So what do I mean by that? So For our business users, for example, let's say you're kind of a performance manager in a game, and you want to do regular management reports on the health of your game. Now, if you can connect Excel to the Looker API and at a click of a button refresh your management report straight into PowerPoint every month, that's going to turn your head. That's going to get you think, hold on, maybe these guys are telling me something I'm interested in here. Likewise, if you're a sales manager and you need to send a team update every day, you don't want to be compiling that by hand. You want to use the scheduling feature. And again, we're trying to tap into their imagination and think, we understand inherently how you use data or how you could use data, and we think these features will help you do things you couldn't do before, rather than, hey, isn't Looker great? Likewise, on our technical users, we have a lot of data scientists at King, so we want to be able to engage them because we want them to be able to do some of the data modeling work. So the fact that GitHub integration is out of the box, that's a big thing for them. They're familiar with these tools, they want to use them, there's a certain amount of technical cachet in using them. Or likewise, the fact that you can push data to a webhook and that you can have tools like Zapier pick that up and push that onto Google Sheets. If you're a user acquisition network manager, for example, being able to push that data out to those third parties to say, well, this is how we think your network is doing, and have that all automated for you and be in control of that, these things really capture people's imagination. So we've done our preparation, we've decided on our architecture, we've worked out the sort of use cases, or at least the features we think are going to resonate with the type of businesses users we've got. Now we want to identify the use cases that are going to help drive this forward. So what we want to do is identify key use cases that we think are going to deliver high value, demonstrate momentum, give us some positive PR, and most importantly, a very clearly defined fixed in scope. Now, in King terms, I would say that a good example of this, to go back to what I was talking about this morning, is games in playtest. You know, as soon as I hear something like that is going to happen around the business, I think, right, these guys are going to need Looker. They're going to be able to achieve things they weren't able to achieve before. Once we can get the sort of hook in there and we can illustrate to them why that matters, we can very quickly help them deliver value from the data in the way they weren't able to before, in a very bounded use case, which is really crucial here. So what we want to avoid, by contrast, is that sort of my BI tool beats your BI tool evangelism. That's not going to get people engaged. We want to focus on that key theme of what can you do now that you couldn't do before. And we also don't want sort of hit and hope. You know, if we build it, they will come. There's our Looker instance. We put a load of great content on it. Help yourself. We're going to need to go in there and we're going to have to attach that to specific use cases and make those sort of do the work for us, generate that and have people able to say, oh, how did you solve that problem? We can't do that yet. And within those use cases, we want to spot champions. We want to take people that we think are going to share our vision of what we're trying to achieve here. Now, again, if we just go straight to a whole team and say, Looker's going to solve your problems, let's train you up, what you're kind of doing there, in my opinion, is you're mixing evangelism with training. We don't want to do that. We want to focus on individuals who can see it, it will resonate with. Maybe they're a data scientist who like the sound of it. They think there's something technically cool in what Looker can do. Or they're a business user who, as you know, over the years has said, listen, we just can't get what we want, the pace of what we want, those data bread lines and so on. So people who are going to take that and can see, they're going to commit to that with energy, and they're going to be happy to take that to other people in the business. It's far more powerful if we can get individuals to commit to it and be the evangelist for us than it is for me to stand on my pulpit and go, here you guys, here's the new religion. So once we've done that, we've got our use cases, we've got our architecture, we've got some key users, and this has worked pretty well for us at King. We then need to take that step further. So let's say we've got a game in playtest, we've got a data scientist pretty psyched about Looker and what it's able to do. They've started to do some things. Their business users around them are starting to say, hey, this is interesting. Okay, now I want to be trained. Now I'm convinced that there's something I can do with this. So what do we do in terms of onboarding? So this onboarding challenge, again, we're trying to avoid sort of one-size-fits-all approaches here. So we do a number of different things. So there's a big difference between spotting a sort of data scientist who's like, look, I don't want to sit in a meeting room for 2 days and have you show me slides and train me here. What I want to do is have a little taster and go away and play with it myself and then work out my own appetite for this product. So we tend to do that quite a lot, particularly around the data science community. An hour or so just to show the basics of the architecture, what LookML is, what modeling is, why it's different, why it solves a problem that they couldn't solve previously, and then we step away and we'll say, okay, go play. Don't go rolling out, loads of stuff across your team perhaps, but certainly build what you want for your own needs, and then once you feel confident, we'll come back and we'll do something much bigger across your whole team. And that's where these targeted workshops come in. So this is around, we'll typically take a sort of day and a half. We'll go to a studio or a business department and we'll pick one use case that everyone in the room can relate to. And we'll say, okay, we're not leaving this room, no pressure, but we're not leaving this room until we've all built something. We're all comfortably understood why we did it that way. And we are going to finish, and this is the key thing, we're going to leave with something you're going to use every single day after this. So typically that breaks down into a morning of sort of the highlights of Looker, how the architecture works, why we care about the modeling, what you can and can't do. Then in the afternoon, we work collaboratively, a couple of us and on the analysis side and engineering side, helping either the business users come up with some dashboarding, some schedules, maybe some Excel exports, or conversely with a data scientist doing the modeling piece, explaining how hub and spoke works. So again, we want to separate those two paths. We don't want to have data scientists in a room listening about dashboarding for things that care more about on the business user side, and we don't want business users getting into the real nuts and bolts of LookML and extending when they're never going to use it. So we, typically there's a couple of us there so we can branch at the first opportunity to then take that and get that going. And then there's the new staff training. So we want to start good habits when people are young. We want them to come into King. We want to say get them to see Looker early and get them to think in a Looker ecosystem way moving forward. So again, we're avoiding one size fits all. We're avoiding in those quick jump starts that here's how you build a dashboard, off you go. We need a bit more than that. People need to understand, in my experience, even if they're never going to do any data modeling, they need to understand the value that layer brings, why it's different, what potential it opens up. And conversely, we don't want to get too deep too quickly. We don't want to jump into table calculations and data groups and caching strategies and things like that. We want people to get some basic confidence of the end-to-end. I've explored some data. I've created a schedule. I've created a dashboard. I've maybe made a quick LookML change to add a country tier or something like that. And then say, OK, now you can do this. What about these other things? And then there's some softer stuff we try to do at King as well in order to keep the momentum and keep that feeling that we're not throwing something over the fence to people, that once we've trained, once we've got your use case up and running, we'll still be there and we'll still be helping you get the most out of the product. So a suggestion, if you're using Slack or HipChat or anything like that, set up a dedicated channel just for Looker support. And the key thing with this is those champions we talked about earlier, they're the people we want to get involved in this channel. We want them answering questions. So it's not incumbent on me and my team in the middle to answer everything. If people buy into the idea of actually we're moving this along together, it's pretty powerful. We want to send out these curated highlights emails, the example here. So we're sending tips and tricks. Maybe we're looking at features that are underused that we think people need to be more aware of. And we're highlighting in our release schedule, and Looker very kindly do monthly releases with lots of material improvements each release cycle. We want to be able to tie those features into the use cases we know are out there. We don't want to say, hey, now you can do multiple schedules off a single data set. We want to say, now you as a network manager in user acquisition can manage multiple network schedules from a single place without having to code again and code again and code again. And then lastly, one thing I would emphasize above pretty much everything else is make sure every one of your Looker users knows about the chat feature. It looks like a gimmick, I'll admit. When I first saw it, I was like, no, they can't provide 24/7 analyst support. But actually, Looker can. And it's a key thing. It helps users understand that it's not incumbent on my team to answer every question. It's not incumbent on anyone at King to answer every single question. That often most of the questions are around how do I use the product, not what does this piece of game data mean. So the fact that you can take that, you can push that and say, Looker will help you answer this question. How do you schedule this? How do I make this LookML change? What does dev mode mean? All of these questions can be answered by people who are sitting there, real, living, breathing people who are here today, I believe. And that's a key thing to surface to them. So finally, we've covered a whole bunch of the main themes here, right? But there's a couple of other things, a couple of foundational things that we're going to have to get right as part of this. Otherwise, all our adoption strategy will count for nothing. So the first one is start with a strong tech foundation, specifically a data warehouse. So I talked about earlier the fact that we have 15,000 queries per day hitting our Exasol infrastructure in the main. Not every company can handle that. Not every company has the engineering skill and the engineering talent and the data warehouse capacity to handle a tool appearing out of nowhere and suddenly generating everything like that. So think about what you're going to need on the data warehouse side first in order to leverage what Looker can do for you. And whether that's migrating to cloud-based products or whatever else, keep all options open would be my advice. If the performance sucks, it doesn't matter how you get people to adopt the tool. You can be as cute about it as you like, but if they have a poor first experience, they will very quickly churn and all your hard work was wasted. So at King, we're pretty lucky to have those foundations. We're able to start from a good point, but if the conversation needs to start a little bit earlier, I would recommend having that conversation first. And lastly, about the softer stuff again, this picks up on some of Frank's points. Looker's not just a tech change, it's a culture change. So be prepared to change your org around what Looker is doing for you. If you need to embed data engineers and analysts closer to the business in order to get the most out of it, consider doing that. We've taken a similar approach at King. It's been extremely useful to bridge that gap between that core truth and the flexibility at the outskirts, because not every game studio or business department can expect to have the data engineering skill that we typically cling to in the middle of the business. So we now want to devolve that out. And that has a bearing on skill sets as well. The sort of classic partitioning of skill sets in the data world where, here are ETL engineers and here are your BI engineers. These guys get the data ready, these guys visualize it. What we find is those two things blur into one another in Looker quite significantly in a very positive way that both sides enjoy, rather than, okay, we don't need BI engineers anymore. That's not true. What we're saying is there's a collective interest in us in understanding the end-to-end life cycle of data here, and data modelers being able to very quickly build dashboards, and BI engineers very quickly being able to build ETL. So be prepared to sort of follow that. And lastly, I'd say, you need to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk and live the kind of, it's a cliche, but be the data culture change you want to see in the business. What do I mean by that? Well, Looker provide the iLooker feature, which is an explore around Looker metadata. Use that as the start of everything. Look at what is happening on your Looker infrastructure. Look at what's working, what isn't. What features are being underused? Where is performance problematic? Where do you need to go out into the business and say, look, your model sucks, and there's something you can do to fix that. So the more you're using that data to drive your journey of adoption, the more you can make your strategy for user adoption bespoke around what's happening in the real world. Back over to Zara.
Thank you. So, as you can see, King pretty much nailed it on every aspect of change management. So, my course was a waste of time. No, I'm kidding. So, we're going to talk about some of that higher level stuff. So, John has spoken a lot about kind of really getting that data infrastructure right, the data warehouse. You should have a caching strategy in place. Happy to talk about that afterwards. Training plans put together. You've gone and done your gap analysis of where people are. But change in the organization, it starts at the top. So have your CEO and C-levels use Looker slide or Looker screenshots or whatever it is that you want to do in all of their meetings. If there's someone that people look up to, have them communicate the wins of this project change. So we're going through a change at Looker in the moment. At the moment, Frank, our CEO, we have a Tuesday email that comes out. Everyone at Looker reads it. And as part of that change that we're doing, there is a section dedicated to that change. The wins, the challenges, how it's going, all that kind of thing. People are going to ask you, why are we changing? Is it because I didn't do something properly? Is it because Bev and Bob had another fallout because their data wasn't the same and they were trying to drive different goals? Yeah, it's all of those things, but be open, be transparent. There's a reason why we're doing this. It's not because you've done anything wrong. We're trying to become a data-driven organization. Why are we bringing in Looker? It's clean, it's going to be fast, it's going to be accurate. Use the terminology that an end user like myself will understand. Saying, oh, well, you can centralize all your data. I'll be like, well, brilliant, that means absolutely nothing to me. If you say to a CSM, I can have your Zendesk tickets for all your clients, your opportunities, your usage, the product usage, all in one space, and I can analyze that and make data-driven actions, that will get me going to that tool rather than creating a spreadsheet for my manager. So what type of organization? This is actually a really fundamental thing to consider. You have a culture at the top, but you also have climate, so kind of like an ecosystem. There are microclimates. You may have a very transparent layer at the top, like we do at Looker, so everything is shared, everything is easily found, but you may have departments that have a different climate. That could be a finance department where when they've made organizational changes before, they've ripped one system out and put another one in. Bev gets a hernia because she doesn't want to come in because she knew IBM and now she doesn't know this. Address that, talk to the leaders of that team, work out how you can lessen that negative impact. Where do you want to be in 3, 6 months, 1 year? Having a plan and sticking to those KPIs and tracking against those KPIs will keep you on target. Some people think, right, let's go with the tough nuts. Let's smack them over the head with this new tool. We'll get them on board and it's going to be a win. Wrong strategy. Start with the early adopters, like John said, the people that have been banging down your door for insightful data, for that single source of truth. Hopefully you should never have to hear that phrase, oh, I think we're singing off different sheets, or whatever it is, singing off different hymn sheets. It's the most frustrating phrase ever, so you can eliminate that. Tracking against those KPIs also means communicating where you are. Take screenshots or PDF schedules of the actual iLooker model. This is how many people that are now using the Looker tool. This is how many people are exploring and asking their own questions of the data and not hammering the data team. All of that is going to help people empower themselves. You want people to be literally singing off the same hymn sheet. You don't want operations and finance to be clashing over something because finance has tweaked the data a little bit to go to the investors, which happens anyway. So remember, as John has said, plan everything, do your gap analysis, speak with people. Again, I can't stress enough, get those C-level executives on board. For me, if I want to make a change across the sales team, CSM team, I go to John O'Keefe. I'll talk to him and say, look, this is the data that we have, this is what I'd like to change. And if he's on board, then you know it's going to be successful because he'll be the messenger there. Again, tracking those adoptions, communicate those wins. Bev and Bob are now friends. They're not ripping each other's hair out. Wins are a huge deal, but also do recognize that there are challenges. This didn't take as quickly as we wanted it to. We've narrowed down that actually our training wasn't quite on point. Who from this team wants to stand up and help us come up with a better training plan? So tools for enabling users. Again, there's correlation between the CEO looking slightly like me, wishes. Blocks. Blocks are an incredible feature of Looker. They're essentially templated code that you can bung into your, well, not bung, pop into your LookML model. They're actually really inspirational. So so I was from an e-commerce background. If someone had showed me at the beginning some of the kind of visualizations that I could have used, that would have enticed me into that tool. And I would have moved off Google Analytics. I know it's not accurate. So you're providing this tool, you've provided the basis, you understand what I need. Never assume as a data analyst what you believe that end user needs. They're the owner of their business. Collaborate with them, and that also helps from a change perspective. DCL, so as John said, we have an amazing support team. I don't know how they do it, and they are called the Department of Customer Love. They literally nail life every day. I wish I could be one of them. Encourage your users to access that. If it's through chat, or if they're not an admin user or something like that, email them. They will respond. It may be a case of them directing you to Discourse and other resources that we already have. Empower your users to use that and share. And that goes back to the Slack channel as well. Having that channel purely for Looker or any change that you're doing, it's that whole safe space. So the data analyst will sit there, but if Bev answers Bob's question or whoever it was, the names that I made up, that's creating a relationship, but they're also on a more similar level. I've got time flashing at me now, so I'm going to kind of pull through. But favorite dashboards, make sure your explores are friendly. Dimensions, measures, you have tools there so that you can label them in the language of the end user. Change in the individual, just to kind of really quickly go through this. This is a real thing, the change curve, and it is pretty much the 7 stages of grief. It's a real thing. When you finish ice cream, that grief, I tell you, it's outrageous. And you've got to pick yourself up, you've got to push through, and if your fiance tells you that it's fine because there's chocolate in the cupboard, you're back on that trajectory and you're off, okay? Think of a time, and be empathetic, think of a time that you've gone through a really rubbish change and try and not make that happen to those people. It's really important where these points are. It is proven to guide people through that phase. Also be conscious, and I've seen this, there is an oscillation between the frustration and the depression stage. So if you, and I know that sounds really dramatic, but if people are low, morale is low. You'll also have a learning dip at this point. There is no point in pushing training at that point. It's not going to take. That's when you need the community spirit, the communication, the transparency to, again, push them up to that experimental phase. Give them permission to build and explore. Can you build and explore for your team? Have change advocates that can highlight those people. It's not gossip, it's this person's not doing as well as I would have thought, but they have amazing ideas. Can I grant them permission just to have a few goes on the explore, playing with different dimensions, different measures? Any questions, come back to me, scooting along. I'm hoping this goes, yeah, brilliant. Nailed it. So, this, I love a Giphy. If you ever get you're all welcome to my email address at zara@looker.com. Send me a Giphy, absolutely love them. This for me represents how change can be and how it is. It is literally like a slap in the face at times. But you can reduce that by not slapping them in the face. Be open from the beginning. Limit those negative impacts. If you know that Bev has been on Oracle for the last 20 years, accept that, acknowledge that, and say, but how has this actually made your life more difficult? Be conscious of different learning styles. Happy to talk to anyone about the different learning styles. Cover a multitude of learning styles to make sure that you get that message across. Over-communicate, and don't spend time creating things that people aren't going to use. Monitor iLooker. Keep an eye on the dashboards people are using, the explores people are using. Always iterate. I'm afraid we don't have any question time because I rabbited on for a bit longer than I was meant to, but you can catch us in and around.